And so I think when I do have like longer periods of calm, my body just like goes back and
Mhm.
is like, remember when this happened? That was terrible.
Yeah.
Let's think about it for
It
weeks.
makes sense why that would happen.
But yeah,
Um,
so my early 20s sucked balls.
yeah.
Great big fat old hairy man ones.
And as you are going to be shocked to know, mine was boring. I guess we'll start with like I graduated high school, went to college, the one um I didn't want to go to, but that's okay. Um I didn't get to move out of my house, which I was not happy with. That's my mom and I have agreed if we could go back in time,
You would have changed that.
we would both have changed that. It would have been better, I think. Um, because one thing I did once I did find some freedom was disappear for
Mm-hmm.
years. And it was probably a good thing. It helped me grow up and it helped me figure out how to be an independent human being. But like I full on disappeared for years and I wasn't even that far away. Um, so I went to my first year of college, figured out I hated it, didn't make friends, was just it was miserable. And I struggled because I had never ever struggled academically before. And I also didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I was 30. And the way that it presented itself started to change a lot then. In high school, I thrived academically because of the way it was set up. My brain took my ADHD and said, here's how to hyperfocus. Here's how to do the best you're going to do when you're really, really busy. Also at that time, most people would have probably considered me a little bit OCD. I was very, everything has to be lined up. I was very type A, and it was the only way to my brain could make sense of things. And that really started to change. I think it was just age
Mm-hmm.
and like what was developmental in my brain. And I couldn't just fly by the seat of my pants, and I had a really hard time. And then I got to the summer after my freshman year of college, and I got a job like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from home, and lived with my aunt and uncle for a summer. Worked at a restaurant. That's where I met my ex. And I had the time of my life. Like, I didn't necessarily, I wasn't like a big party person ever, but like I had friends, I went out with them, we had like fun. Um, and that's when I started to kind of be like, oh, I don't have to do every single thing that someone tells me. I can like just do stuff because I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the following year was a difficult time because I was like, I'm a sophomore in college. I've just had this experience. I've had all the freedom in all the world for 3 months. And now I have to come back, need to be home and in bed by 10, need to have XYZ. My sister um was angry that I was there. We've talked about it since then. Like she had some stuff going on. I didn't realize it. And like it just,
So were you going into your junior year when your sister graduated high school?
no, she,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or no, she was 2012.
yeah,
So you were going into your senior
into
year
my
when she
senior year.
graduated high
Yeah.
school. I guess I didn't realize there was. I mean, I knew there was that much of a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was a senior in college when she was a freshman in high school.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we were in high school for 1 year together.
College.
High school for 1 year together.
I know, but you said you were
I
a
know. I'm
senior in
just saying.
college
So
when
yes,
she. Yes.
but like that year was, we fought a little bit. We did the same sports and like had some things. So it was a little bit, but at the end of the day, like we got along and we had each other's back. When I was a sophomore and she was in high school, bad year, bad year for us. And so I
So
went,
she would have been a junior
yeah.
in high school the year of your. That's a
Sophomore.
bad year for all girls.
Yep. She was getting bullied
Mm.
also like pretty badly. And I didn't know. I wasn't there and she wasn't really talking about it. Um, and we just struggled and
And
then
it wasn't me.
she didn't go to the same high school.
I wasn't bullying her.
She would have though.
No, that's a lie. We probably would have been really good friends and
Those
dominated.
or frenemies. Those ones are
Yeah.
just like to each other. But yeah, anyway.
Sorry,
Um,
keep going.
That's okay. Um, and so I got through that year not well. That so I started dating. It was actually after the summer because I had a crush on a different guy. It ended. It was not. It was whatever. And then I got together with my ex, and we were really into each other. And then he got in a car accident on Valentine's Day, my sophomore year, and a head-on collision. And I like went to the hospital, was there, just really quickly became part of his family. It wasn't even that, but he broke an arm. He got a really bad black eye, totaled the car. He had to have surgery the next day. So I like stayed the night at his mom's house with just me. My mom was going through a really hard time with me being in that type of relationship. She was like, "What about your morals? You're spending the night. What have you been doing and lying to me this whole time?" Like, it was not a good moment for our relationship. And so by spring, I moved in with him and his mom's. He lived with her. He had been out. He was older than me. And he had moved out forever ago, and he had moved back in because his mom had a heart attack and like needed help or something at one point. So he just like lived there. So I moved in. We got our own place like 6 months later. We tried to long before that, but first the restaurant we worked at closed and we lost our jobs, and then we got new jobs and we literally couldn't find anywhere. There was like no housing. So when we finally did that, we moved in together. Graduated college. We were together for 6 years before we got engaged and married. Um, And in that time, we worked at the same restaurant, and then for a while we worked at separate places. Then I got a job at the last restaurant that I worked at, and he was working at Maine Maritime Academy at that time, and then they closed for the summer. So he came to work for this restaurant that summer. Just he was supposed to just be a bus person, but he ended up being in the kitchen because of what we needed for staffing, and he just never left. Um, and that restaurant I still have some really close friends from there. It's probably a trauma bond. Weird stuff happened there. It was like a vortex, but not the good kind. Um, and I, as I was like trying, because I disappeared from my family, like I talked to them once a month, maybe. Like you wouldn't picture that now, I'm sure, because that's weird. I'm with them all of the time. But I in this journey of trying to like without even knowing what I was doing, trying to find my own boundaries and do the things that I had never experienced um to a certain level, I became not a great person. I didn't I didn't like her. She talked about other people behind their back sometimes, and just like I was not a good daughter, I wasn't a great friend, I don't think. And I mean, my early 20s was basically just that, like dating. We eventually got married. That time, we weren't on a good place when we got married. I honestly, it was kind of a weird decision, except it had already been, planned. Yeah. So we just kind of like went through with it. It wasn't great. And then so the restaurant, I started working for my family, which had never been my plan, and just I was floundering with my career because I had graduated college with a degree in marketing and I was still working at the restaurant and I was applying to jobs left and right and couldn't find anything that I was qualified for. And so I ended up working like three random jobs. I was working for my family part time, I was working at the restaurant still, and then I found a job at the hospital running this group for pregnancy, like being the coordinator for that. And I just was I was having my first experience of like I took all the steps that I was supposed to take. Why isn't any of this working for me?
Hmm.
And so I think that's the I've talked about before. The first round of like depression I had was my sophomore year in college. It was brief but strong. It was like 2 or 3 months long, and I just couldn't get out of bed. I just cried and slept. And then that part of me was just like, this is how you become a workaholic. And that's what I did. I worked like 60 hours a week minimum and just trying to ignore all my feelings and the like doubts I was having about myself and like wondering why I just couldn't seem to find any sort of success
Hmm.
by myself. And during that time, my marriage got really awful. And so I decided to leave. So I moved. My sister, in the meantime, had been with the same guy since she was in high school, and she's married to him now. They have 2 kids, wonderful, happy life. His parents had a rental that had frozen because it was winter and they needed someone to look out for it while it was empty. And so I moved into that house in my hometown, and I was there for probably 2 months, I think. And in that time, talked to my ex, who was, and we worked a lot of stuff out. I think that it didn't work out in the long run. You have all your opinions as to why, and that's fine. And I know, but as a person, he did a lot of growing during that period. And like we had a couple of really good years after of that. We got back together, we moved to my hometown and um got pregnant. That was kind of like my later 20s. But I mean, it's just my life is not.
It's hard to say, okay, we don't have to put this in the podcast either. And it's hard to say because now you have a kid, and
Mhm.
obviously that like changes everything. But is there any part of you that's like, God, I wish I had just stayed away that one time I left?
If I look back on it,
Because like you had a couple good years.
yeah,
Great. But then you
really,
had a couple really bad
really bad
years
ones.
where like
Um,
I think it changed a lot of you
yeah,
because
I just
it
became.
wasn't a good
No,
situation.
it wasn't. It wasn't. And it was on both. And this is why I have discussed with my therapist about the fact, and like we're going to talk about it more because I just brought it up for the first time. I, uh, someone will be like, that man was flirting with you. And I'll be like, I don't want to do that. Because I am not secure enough in my own self-worth and boundaries where I feel comfortable getting into a relationship with someone because I know exactly what will happen because of my own actions. Maybe not to certain extremes and certain personality points, but like I can take someone who is independent and can handle their own things and whatever, and I am going to.
I completely disagree.
Oh, see, I don't at all. I'm going to love you as hard as I possibly can just so maybe you'll like me. And it turns people into people who take advantage of me without meaning to.
It doesn't turn the right people that way. So the reason I asked is because probably 2 weeks before mine and Trav's wedding, we tried to call it off.
Hmm.
Um, we called his mom, who I was very close to,
Hmm.
and she stopped at the house, and we were just like nothing significant had happened.
Hmm.
We were just, it was probably cold feet, but
Hmm.
we were just like, we aren't ready for this. We don't want to do it. Like the whole thing had been set up. We didn't pay a whole lot of money for it. We were very young. Um, and she's like, just sleep on it. Like, I think it's fine. You guys will be okay. And she was also very supportive. She's like, if you think this in a week, we'll cancel it.
Hmm.
Like, it'll be fine. We clearly went through the wedding. The night before the wedding was a disaster. He was not nice. Things happened. He got very drunk. He showed up to our wedding drunk. And I still, looking back, would not have not gotten married because so much of what happened after that, I think, I don't want to say was needed because, like, obviously it wasn't needed for me to be treated like shit or cheated on.
Mhm.
But there's so much of it that I am just like happy I went through it
Mhm.
and I got it out and I but
Also, for me, experiencing those couple of years after,
the good ones.
yeah,
Hmm.
um, I think I earned them.
Yeah.
And I did grow the portion of us getting back together. So I was gone for 2 months. We talked after the first week a lot. And it wasn't about getting back together necessarily. We were still just each other's like support person. And so we talked, and the whole time I wanted to go back.
Hmm.
The second time I didn't, not one time. Um, so that's how I knew it was right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The first time I was still young, not necessarily age-wise, but like
Do you think it was like a comfortability thing? Like you wanted to go back because he was comfort, like he was where you were comfortable?
maybe,
Because I mean, he was in fact like your only for
right.
the most part.
Yeah.
So,
And I was so set on it until I did it, and the minute I did it, I was like, "Oh no."
hmm.
And I did enjoy that time alone. A lot.
Hmm.
It was the only time I've ever lived by myself in my entire life, and I loved it. Like, so much.
Hmm.
I could do what I want when I wanted. I could set my own thing, like schedule and meals and just like every single aspect of it. I was like, "Oh, this is
Which
nice."
is so funny because now she doesn't want to be alone at all.
I could have, if I lived by myself, it would be different, but I don't, so I don't want to be alone. Does that make
I
sense?
mean, you don't want to live by yourself at all.
Oh, no, because I have you guys, but if I didn't, I'd be
That was
fine.
like never even a question. The second you left, you were like, I'm here and I'm here for good.
And you were like, great.
Yeah.
Like it was, if I didn't have you guys, then
Yeah.
I would be alone and I'd be great with it. Be totally fine. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like that growth period that we went through both together and separately as we got back together and worked through some shit, I think that was very necessary. So that point I would never that's not the one that makes me go, I wish I hadn't done that. Because I think it was really necessary because I finally learned how to stand up for myself. I like you came in as things were starting to hit the fan again. You didn't know me before. So imagine her, but worse. So much worse. Um, as far as letting people walk all over me, say whatever they wanted to me about me, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so I think no, I think I needed that.
Okay, so now we're into late
Yeah.
20s, and I'm only very just starting into my early 30s. But so my late 20s, what are we gonna do? Like 25 and up,
Yeah.
have been pretty, I don't want to say boring, but like,
In comparison to the rest of your life, it's been a
yeah,
lot calmer.
we bought, what is it, 2020? Yeah, so we bought my dream house when I was 25. I loved that house. We were still living in New Jersey at the very beginning of it. And we came up to watch my little cousin's recital, I believe. And there was a for sale by owner sign out in front of the house. And I was like,
The sign.
that's it. And we knew Tyler was getting out of the military. Um, we were still a little rocky, so we were trying to decide for probably a good 6 months. I had planned on staying in New Jersey by myself with my then two children. And he was going to move back to Maine. I had zero desire to move back to this state. I didn't want to do it.
Mhm.
Um, Towards the end of that 6 months, we had started working through some of the things in our marriage. Um, So when we found that house, I was like, that's the sign that I should be moving home. Like I remember that house being built. I remember riding by it every day to go to school. So we contacted the owners. We put in such a low offer that I was like, we're never gonna get this. And he came back with $5,000 over. We were like, that's it. we contacted the real estate agent I used in my first marriage, um, bought the house. We found out a little later than I would have liked to that we used a VA loan and you have to occupy the house immediately. It was in like 30 days.
Hmm.
Um, and Tyler wasn't getting out for like another 14 months. So I moved back to Maine with my two children by myself, and Tyler stayed in New Jersey. He lived in his friend's basement for the next 14 months because we were now paying a mortgage, so we couldn't also pay for our mortgage in New Jersey or rent. Um, so I had 18, or it was a little over, I think it was like 15 months of pretty much, I mean, I was a single parent. Tyler came up a couple of weekends here and there. He came up probably a lot more than he should have. He would drive when he shouldn't have been driving and whatever.
Just like tiredness
Yeah.
wise.
Um, we I am a military spouse, so most of my kids' lives, I had like pretty much been a single parent, but not to this extent.
Mm.
I had no one. I mean, we were back in Maine, so I had family members, which didn't start off as great as I thought it was going to. The whole reason for us moving back to Maine was so my kids could get to know my dad and my stepmom and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. And it's like once we moved up here, everybody kind of forgot we existed. So that hurt a lot and was like a lot for me to deal with at first. I expected everybody, I don't know really what I expected. I just expected us to be more of a priority at first because I mean, Olin was almost 3 and most of them had never met him. So that sucked. And then Tyler moved back to Maine. Things were still like a little rocky here and there. We were doing a little bit better. Um, then COVID hit. COVID, and I think I discussed this in one of our previous ones. COVID was mine and Tyler's like turning point
For the good.
for the good. Most people, it broke them up. A lot of people. Many, many divorces. Ask my therapist. She has lost most of her couples due to COVID. Um, Tyler and I were forced for the first time in our marriage to spend so much time together. I, at the time, was selling cars. Can't do that with COVID. We tried selling cars from home for a little bit. It was weird. Nobody liked it. Couldn't do it anymore. And my daycare closed. So I was home all of the time. Both of our kids were home all of the time. Tyler worked at a trash plant for far too long. He's dealing with other people's trash. COVID was rampant, and they just stayed open for so long. I mean, I guess people's trash still needed to be dealt with, but it was scary.
Yep.
But then he ended up getting laid off and was home for probably 6 months, I think. So we had 6 months of like all of the time togetherness. And we worked through a lot in those 6 months. Um, we would get to the point where we were so sick of each other that the things that had bothered us before were just coming out. There was a lot of things that I didn't agree with in the way that I was treated by members of Tyler's family. Those things were brought up, and that was a lot of resentment in our marriage because I was like, there's no way he doesn't see this.
Mhm.
And he just did not. He just didn't acknowledge the fact that it even existed. So there was a lot in our marriage that was an issue that neither one of us even realized was a thing.
Mhm.
So
Because you had other bigger fish to fry.
right, we weren't focused on the little smirks that were happening or whatever. So in the middle of COVID, I started working at the real estate office. Um, we my marriage was going well. My kids were happy and healthy and rambunctious as hell.
And then he got deployed.
And then he got deployed, and it it was fun. I it was his last,
Yep.
yep, his last deployment. Um, things were rough. I knew that him switching to reserves, he was still probably going to be deployed or guard, but not as quickly as it happened. He was there not even a year and he got deployed. Um, I found out I was pregnant right before he left, I think.
Yep.
Yep. I don't think I've discussed this, but that pregnancy was my fifth miscarriage, I believe. I had had a couple in our early marriage after Shayna passed away, and then a few throughout having kids. Um, so he was gone probably a month, and I found out I was having a miscarriage
A late.
late. Yeah, I was 14 weeks,
Yes.
15 weeks, somewhere around there. We had already found out it was a girl. So we were very excited about that because we had two boys. Um, Morgan's mother poked me with a stick so we could find that out.
She had to milk your finger.
She milked my
She
finger.
wouldn't bleed.
Um, so we ended up red crossing Tyler home, and some other things happened in there that were not great. So that was fun. Dealt with that.
Yep.
Not gonna say that on here.
No. I'll cut that.
Yep.
It's okay.
And after that, I feel like most marriages who go through a miscarriage, we had a rough couple of months. I don't think people focus enough on how much that also hurts the dad. People are so focused on the poor, like, oh my God, that poor mom, and which also still valid.
Well, yeah, because you not only went through it, but you ended up getting postpartum depression.
Yep. And even myself, I don't think I ever focused on Tyler in those moments and like what he was going through. And he was just so laser focused on me and myself. Um, and once again, there was other things happening in there that he was trying to make better. So he was, what's the word I want to look for? He was,
Overcompensating.
yeah, sort of. So another rough patch in our marriage. I mean, we were pretty used to it. So we dealt with it and we had talks, long conversations. I think there was even a little separation in there. No?
No,
Did we not?
that was before then.
Oh, okay.
That was just before you started working with us.
Yep.
It was after the therapy of COVID.
Yep.
Because it brought out a lot of things and you had a
Yep.
minute.
Yep.
If I recall from my perspective, because we started being friends
Mhm.
during before.
You were the only person I ever told that whole story.
Yeah.
Ever.
Love that for us.
Yep.
Um,
I didn't even want to tell him.
I know.
Yeah, it was a bad moment.
I think though that may have been the first time that it was a rough patch where you both went through the worst thing, but you didn't take it out on your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like I think the post-COVID therapy that we're gonna call what like a therapy. I don't know what you want to call it, but like I think it was like that first step.
Immersion therapy.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah, not like not the good therapy, the bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that was I saw it from my perspective that way. It could have been different inside
Mm-hmm.
of what you were going through, but it was like they're both doing bad.
Yeah.
But that didn't mean together you were doing bad.
Yeah, no, we were also older, which clearly helps.
And you had been through every heartbreak imaginable.
Mm-hmm. And this sounds terrible, but we were at the point where miscarriages were just so a Tuesday. Like, it still obviously hurt, especially this one.
I feel like that one really, it was far along, and I feel like it may not have been the thing that made you feel this way, but you struggled so bad.
And a big part of it is it was just and this is terrible because I have two children that I absolutely love and adore from a time in our marriage that wasn't great. But this was the first pregnancy where we were like
You
happy.
were doing so
We were
good.
so happy. We were both so excited. It was our last baby. Um,
Until it wasn't.
until it wasn't.
Spoiler alert.
It was also a girl, which,
It would have healed something in you.
yeah, there was,
It would have.
and not only for myself, I just knew how badly Tyler wanted a girl. And he's talked about it ever since we got pregnant with a girl. Um, so that was a hard time in our life, but also a very healing. We figured out a lot of things about ourselves. We figured out how to go through some of these traumas
Mhm.
in a more healthy way than we had in the past. Um, and in this whirlwind of a time, we decided to sell said dream house because we were also drowning in debt. And the market was COVID market, and we could make so much more than what we bought our house for.
And you did.
And we did. And we ended up moving into a family home of Tyler's that his dad and his grandfather built, which was surprisingly, I think, a little bit more nostalgic for me than for him. Like, I thought it was the coolest thing.
Hmm.
We were going to completely gut the whole house and redo it. Um, we changed the floor plan a little bit, but like watching him and his dad, because his dad came up and helped for a week, watching him and his dad work on rebuilding the house that his dad and his grandfather had built was just such a cool moment.
Hmm.
Um, we found out before we started this renovation that we were pregnant again
On purpose.
on purpose. We did, in fact, try for this one. 1 out of 3, it's fine. 4. And things were good. Tyler had switched careers in the Guards, so he ended up having to go to tech school for a little bit of this, which
Picture it.
Maine.
Maine. No, he left twice.
Yes.
Okay,
He had
so
two
the first time you were living in a house that was absolutely just not to your standards of living.
No, it was invaded with mice.
It had a lot to do. He leaves. She can't use the oven because a mouse got in there one time,
And I refused to use it ever
and
since.
she refused to use it after that. He comes back. Things move forward. Has a baby. It went well. Moving on. Leaves for tech school again. Living in a camper. 3 children. 2 dogs.
A newborn.
A newborn, and she gets COVID.
Badly.
Like, I
had
didn't
been-
know if she was gonna make it, got COVID.
It had been. So this was, we were going into the 3rd year of COVID,
Mhm.
and I hadn't touched it. Hadn't had it. Nothing. We talked many, many times about how invincible we were, because we hadn't got it. I thought I was going to die. My dad
Yeah.
took all 3 of my children for a week straight. It was the first week of school. It was a lot.
Was intense.
And then the house finished.
Yep.
Prematurely. We moved in. I was done. Couldn't live in a camper
And then
anymore.
I was done with my marriage, so I moved into.
Morgan moved in. We finished that house and sold it. Also made a lot of money.
It did, and that one was, I feel like you guys kind of went into that thinking that might be your forever house, and for a multitude of reasons, it wasn't.
Yep. And
it was another way to financially get ahead again, just because the market was still decent. You had done so much work and turned that from basically not livable to a stunning,
yep.
stunning home.
And we definitely went into it thinking it was going to be our forever home.
Mm-hmm.
We had plans on other things we were going to do to it.
Yeah, like giving it to the kids one day or building houses out back or doing whatever. Like, it was a whole thing.
And it just ended up not being where we envisioned ourselves at the end.
Mm-mm.
And I think that happens with a lot of people. I thought buying my dream house was going to be one and done, never again.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes certain circumstances just come up.
Yep.
And you do what you do with it. And so we sold it. We were in debt again, paid it all off. And here we are again.
Lived in a rental?
We lived in a rental for a few months that was trash. I don't recommend it. We'll never do it again. Then we bought another house. Thank God I convinced these fools not to build.
We were dead set.
Dead set. And
You were on board, sort of,
I
for a minute.
was mostly on board.
But then you thought about the timeline and went, I can't.
The timeline I just was never on board with. We were struggling to find a piece of land we liked, we could afford, that was buildable.
In the area we wanted it to be in.
I was gonna say we were starting to look in areas that made no sense for you. And we were trying to factor everybody into the situation.
And we really had decided at that point, this is something we would like to make permanent. Regardless of whatever else happens, I was actually in the equation. It wasn't just you guys as a family.
Yeah, no, we weren't looking, because if that were the case, we probably would have moved further south.
Right.
Because my husband works further south. And like I said, we'd even started looking at land a little further, which made no sense for you in your circumstances. We
would have made it work, but it would have been more inconvenient.
Right.
And the place that we ended up finding was kind of the best case scenario for everybody.
And what's so funny is we almost looked at it months and months and months before.
It was overpriced.
Yeah, it was overpriced. And the pictures were so hard to tell what was even happening.
And it ended up being almost the exact design that we had come up with. But instead of it being in a straight line, it kind of has a curve in it. And that doesn't matter.
And we still have big plans for this house. There is a lot of things that need to get done before things happen to this house. It's so livable. I mean, any other human being would move into this house and be so unbelievably happy with the way it is.
Except the tiny, tiny kitchen.
The kitchen is
Explain to me the tiny, tiny kitchen.
For such a big house.
Such a big house.
We have 4 bedrooms.
We have people who come in here and they're like, oh my God, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
It has to. Do you know how many fucking people live here?
We have 4 bedrooms that should technically be 5. Because we have the pantry room.
Yeah.
And we have a basement that could have 10 more bedrooms in it.
Yeah.
So
it's going to have at least 2 more.
It has the smallest, dumbest kitchen.
It's smaller than this podcast room.
It is. It's so small.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It's fine.
But anyway.
It'll be bigger eventually.
So my marriage has been great. We're doing well. We have a few things here and there. Tyler actually just had a really bad week. And I think going back into like our internal feelings, I get so scared when he has a week like that, because I'm like, what did I do? What did he do? What's going to happen?
Yep. I do too. Like, and I'm not even part of your marriage, and I do the same. Like, that's, I think yours is probably a little more extreme as far as like what your imagination can think of. But like when I first came back from Boston, we all had kind of a weird week, and I was like, oh no, I left and now they realize their life is better without me and they don't want me here anymore. Like, it's just, I feel like that's always going to be, our minds jump to conclusions. And that's why it's so good that we can think them, but then eventually someone says something out loud and we just communicate about it.
And I will say, I have had a lot of people get divorced after 25 years, and everybody's like, what, like, why now? And they're like, well, this happened in year 10. And they're like, but what your brain does after you've experienced something, especially in a marriage, you could be 15 years past whatever it was that happened and wake up one morning and be like, nope,
I can't do this anymore.
Because no matter how much Tyler and I have worked through this, and I can't speak for him, I don't know what his brain says 95% of the time. But there is still moments where I'm like, I'll just be doing something and I'm like, oh, I wonder if she did this better. Or like, I wonder if he hates that I do this. And I am well aware that's me internally and my anxieties and insecurities. So it's never anything that I ever feel the need to voice. But I could see where somebody who has gone through more trauma than I have in my marriage, where that's just One day they're done.
They can't. It's so
They
tiring.
can't do those
Mhm.
thoughts anymore. They can't have that insecurity stuck in their head anymore.
Mm.
So it makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think if you've had the perfect marriage or what you view as the perfect marriage for 10 plus years, you're never going to understand it
Yeah.
because you just got to do it. And I don't recommend doing it. So have the perfect marriage. Just be happy.
Just be. Uh, so my early 20s, we were talking about my late 20s. Um, my whole personality for a straight 4.5 years was just trying to get pregnant. That's it. That's all I cared about. That's all I wanted out of life. And it just wasn't happening. So I was just like sad most of the time. And I was doing a little better in my career. Things were really starting to like go in a direction. I became a big part of my family business and actually really enjoyed it, even though I was kind of shocked about it. And changed positions there a lot at first as I like worked my way to where I'm at right now. And so that part was going well. My marriage was decent because that was those like good couple of years. And when I got pregnant, finally, after they said like that's probably not going to happen, it was just like a miracle. And I was thrilled about it, and he was thrilled about it. And he was so good to me my whole pregnancy. He was so good, and is still a great dad. Like especially newborn stage, I couldn't have asked for a better person to go through the hard newborn stage with. We took turns. We made sure the other person was getting enough sleep. Um, and it's been like that again now that Graham's had medical stuff that we've gone through in the last couple of years. When it comes to that, he's a really good person to work with. Um, so there was that. And then it kind of just started turning around. And we were not nice to each other. I was allowing things um, that I shouldn't, and he was taking advantage of that, I think. And, you know, it just came to a point where it wasn't working anymore. And so we all know I moved in with you. But as far as my personality wise, I turned 30 years old in 2021. And I said to myself, like, I'm going to make this turning 30 thing that some people view as like, oh God, no, I don't want to get old, into the most beautiful thing for myself. I'm really going to focus on talking better to myself, feeling better about myself, and just not caring what other people thought about my decisions and my actions. Because I'd spent 90% of my life only worrying about most of that. Um, so like before then, I think I had like 3 tattoos and I was hiding them 90% of the time. And then I woke up one day and I was like, I want a sleeve so bad and I've wanted it forever. I know what I want. And I started doing it. And now it's most of my arm. Yay for me. Expensive endeavor, but nonetheless. Um, and I dress very differently and I hold myself very differently. And I'm still like more self-conscious than a good part of the population. She sees me every day, get up, get ready, put it all on, look at myself, go in the mirror and go, that's it, I'm not going. I look awful. I don't want to do it, but like I get through it. Um, and so I think that my late 20s and then early 30s, that's what my like focus in life has been about, is really like learning myself, using therapy as a tool to take some of the things that I don't like about myself and or I struggle with and like turning them into a positive. I have a binge eating disorder that I didn't talk about for 30 straight years and finally like went to therapy about, and I haven't binged in 2 years, a year and a half. Like I still get to a point where like I'm gonna hurt myself, ha ha ha, and then like I eat.
Because my cooking's fantastic.
It is because her cooking's fantastic. And I still like snack and whatever, but like I would, as a control thing, secret eat until it physically hurt me.
So I was the complete opposite about turning 30. I was not ready. I was also coming on the other side of some pretty bad postpartum depression. I was a little tiny terrified. Um, I thank all I could say is thank God I went through postpartum depression when my marriage was good because boy, she would have been bad. Um, I wasn't where I expected myself to be at 30 career wise, which I'm not really all that sure why, because if you're a military spouse, you are well aware
It's not really about you,
it all gets
unfortunately.
put on hold.
Yeah.
So I really didn't even start preparing
Just the
for the
tiniest little
smallest
stick.
stick. I didn't start doing anything career wise for myself until my very late 20s. Um, so I'm not sure why I expected to be further along than I was, but I did.
It's because you're so smart and you have so much potential and you're aware of
And
those
I
things.
also
And so you
just,
expected it to just like happen, even though it couldn't have
yeah,
at some points.
I also just live in an area that really isn't conclusive to a woman being super successful, especially with the skills I have. I'm very good at marketing. It's not really that big of a thing here to do outside of what we do. Um, so that was a big deal for me turning 30. I felt like I was the worst version of myself I had ever been. I've had many children. I gained weight. I
Same.
have spots on my body that I'm very unhappy with. And still to this day, and I'm almost, or I'll be 32 come next year, but like, I also in my 30s am just like, as long as I love me, and not that I like need Tyler to love me, but he does,
Hmm.
just no matter
It's
what.
okay to need it.
Yeah, but like, if he weren't there, that wouldn't be something I was searching for.
Hmm.
But as long as we're happy and I'm happy and would I like to lose a few pounds? It'd be ideal.
I've never stopped thinking about it.
Never, and I probably never will.
Yeah.
I think as females, it's just kind of something you do.
Yeah.
Um,
I do now that because I have gone through probably the most traumatic part of my life in the last since Grant was 18 months old, just with all of that kind of stuff. And especially like the last few 6 months have been really scary for me. And I have ignored all of the things that I know I should probably do to keep myself happy. And
your self care.
yeah, my self care has really just kind of shit the bed. And so when I came out the other side of that, I immediately fell into a terrible, terrible place and I knew it was happening. And so in real time, I was like, okay, I have to do this, 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 and this if I'm ever going to pull myself out of this. And I was still, for the first few days, I still just like cried constantly and whatever. But then you and I had a really good conversation and day where it was like nothing special happened, but I was just like, I need to just get this off my chest. And we talked about it. And I've talked about it with my therapist since then. And it's like, I don't necessarily need my goal to ever have a number. I don't
Weight wise,
weight wise.
okay.
Um, but I do know how I want to feel, and that is able to move my body and able to play with the kids and like not be like drenched in sweat and like like I want to just be able to do stuff, but I also need to know that even though my brain can think of 16 like it was yesterday, bodies change and they age, and that's okay. But I have to have realistic expectations of my body
Mhm.
and like find the beauty in that, and also find the beauty in like the small wins because it's not going to be the same and it never is again. So if you're stuck on that, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Like even something as small as I had surgery a couple of years ago and I have three little scars from it. And sometimes I let myself dwell on it, and I'm like, I'm not showing anyone my fat ass abdomen anyway, so I don't know why this is an
And
issue.
they ain't going nowhere.
But they're so it's just like little things like that. It's just kind of just that's just part of my body now, and that's okay.
Yep. So I think to wrap this up
Mhm.
a little bit, we can say if you're at a period of your time where you're feeling overly self conscious, it sucks. I'm sorry. We've all been there.
I think
You're,
it gets better with age.
it gets better with age. You're probably going to go back to that point
Hmm.
throughout your life
Yep.
for different reasons. Having babies always sends somebody, almost always. Um, if you're in a really tough spot in a relationship or a marriage, it's okay to leave.
And it's
Or
okay to work it out.
yeah, and it's
It's not
okay to
going to
work
stay
it
the
out.
same.
Um, I can tell you right now, you could probably talk to anybody who knew what Tyler and I were actually going through our marriage, and they would have been like, never.
Break up.
The amount of people, I mean, one of my best friends has told me multiple times, just leave. Like, you're worth more.
Hmm.
And I am, in fact, worth more. And staying was not me saying that I wasn't.
Hmm.
So know your worth, but also know the worth of the people that you're dealing with
Hmm.
because Tyler was also worth more to me. So that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Find somebody, find your person, find the person you can have a conversation with about literally anything because it can snap you out of more than you realize.
Yeah.
Um,
You could be headed for a real tailspin
yeah,
and have the right conversation with the right person. That's why I think it's important to surround yourself with those people, like whether they're family, friends, significant others, like foster those relationships because that's going to be what saves you
yeah.
at the end of the day.
Know your boundaries, speak your boundaries,
Hmm.
love yourself, even if that person is hard to love. Trust me, I know.
I've had periods.
Yeah,
So if you've made it this far, you're an angel.
you're not.
I hope you cried a little. I did. Silently over here with my tears sucking back. I'm so good at sucking back in my body. Like, nope.
Ew, that's a terrible spirit. Um, like, follow, share.
Yeah, we can be found wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube.
We have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok,
We're everywhere and
the
nowhere.
Rogue Podcast, the Dot Rogue
The dot
Podcast.
rogue podcast because the road podcast was taken. I'm still salty about it. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.